met Hippocrates. And I said, you have an uphill battle. You have a very, very big disease. Well, that was 25 years ago. Samantha reversed that disease. Now, is this a story? The story is truth. And you're so seldom hearing truth, it's hard for you to know when you're being told the truth. That's it. You've been lied to so often. And you expect the worst. Chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, chronic pain. You know how easy that is? I've never seen a person not be able to reverse that if they do what it takes to reverse it. But they make it a giant disease, and they create new drugs for it. And they tell you all of these diseases are incurable. They're chronic diseases. Nothing is incurable, except our brains, I think. This guy I thought was going to die. We had our nurses and medical team look at him every other minute because this guy was sick. Obesity, cirrhosis of the liver, hepatitis C, diabetes, and he was on his way to a liver transplant. He was like the Walking Dead. That's all I could say. I thought he was already dead and breathing and walking and talking. Completely reversed. Cervical cancer, sexually transmitted. It's a viral disease. Sexually transmitted disease. Okay. This was a great story, this next one. We have a big event once a year at Hippocrates. As a matter of fact, it's coming up the 24th of this month. I fly in from Europe on the 23rd. The 24th, we'll have 3,000 or 4,000 people at Hippocrates. We call it Raw Fest. And every year we have different entertainment, and if you win the entertainment, you get a free week at Hippocrates. Well, this girl came to us with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and she won the dance contest that year. We did a 1950s thing, and she won it. And I said, I've really always loved giving this prize to somebody, but I love giving it to you more than anyone else. That was 12, 14 years ago, completely well. My favorite guest, you're not supposed to have favorite children or favorite guests. I do have favorite guests sometimes. This couple here, completely blind. Not only are they completely blind, they work with blind people and teach them to read with Braille. Newly blind people, usually diabetics or that type of thing. They're so in love. All day long they sit and kiss one another and talk in admiration of one another. Not only did they go through our guest program, but when they started to get well, they came back and became health educators. The only health educators we have in the world that are completely blind, and they work with a blind community there to do it. And when you see these people, you and I have it so damn good, and we're whining like babies all the time. I just got on my knees when I met these people, and I said, thank you, God, for introducing me to these people and showing me, how I've got to humble myself even deeper. And thank you every single day for what I have. These people were not only blind, but by the way, reversed diseases that they were dying from. Prostate cancer, easy stuff. This poor woman for 38 years, adenocarcinoma, reversed it. My favorite thing we do at Hippocrates, by the way, is infertility. Matter of fact, we used to, when we had a different place we ate, have dozens and dozens of pictures of babies that people couldn't have. And they go to these fertility clinics, and they usually come back with cancer. That's a result of fertility. Very few have babies, by the way, and because we're injecting hormones into their bodies. And people have babies left and right. 2 months, 3 months after they come out. And one of my great funny stories, this is a very quiet woman. She happens to live in northern Florida. I was speaking on the west coast of Florida in a place called Clearwater, near Tampa, if you know that area. And she was in the front row, and she kept grabbing my pants leg, and she said, let me say something. And she's very quiet, so I said, what does she want to say? And after I was done speaking to the group of a couple of hundred folks, she stood up and said, just today, in the morning, I went to the doctor who said my advanced stage 4 melanoma was gone. And she was going to the #2 man in the United States on melanoma. And I said, what did he say? He said, he kept me there for 2 hours, he couldn't believe. He kept testing me, retesting me, talking to his colleague, and testing, because he's never seen a person reverse it. And I said, what do you think about that? And she said, well, I think that what I was told was right, and I was smart enough to do it. And I said, you got it, sister. Because I can talk all day long about what I do, how I live, it doesn't matter. It's just mental masturbation, I say. Until you start to get it, that you've got to employ this. It's not good enough on a Tuesday afternoon, me coming here and yelling at you at the top of my lungs and giving you impressive stories. Who gives a shit? You got to get out of here, you got to employ this, and it's hard. Because your families are going to go against you, and the doctors are certainly going to be against you. And the culture is going to be against you, and society is going to, then you're going to get home, you're going to put the telly on, you're going to see all those delicious looking foods, and then God forbid you tell your priest or minister you do this, and they're going to be against you. Your relatives are going to be against you. And you got to be brave. You got to be brave to do the right thing. You got to be brave to live the truth in 2018. You got to really want to live. And those of you that say that you're spiritually awakened, unless you actually have the passion to live, you're not spiritually awakened. You've got to know every second of your life it's a gift of your life. You've got to be willing to do whatever it takes. You've got to be willing to die to live. You've got to be willing to sacrifice your life to live. And it's hard to do that. But on the other hand, it's much harder to suffer. And it's much harder for you to die, and much harder to leave your family behind. All of that is much harder as far as I'm concerned. So here are the things in the food that are beyond the phytochemicals we spoke about. So when they asked me in 1980 to be the director, I said, great, but we've got to figure out how this works. We watched it work, but we really didn't know how it worked. And we started to diligently read international science. Anna speaks 7 languages, so sometimes we have the fortune we can not just look at English science. We found out that all plant-based foods in its organic state, non-sprayed state, have hormones in it. Now, how many of you know what a hormone is? Hormone is the language in your body. And who is speaking? Cells are speaking to cells. Now, the brilliant part of the human cell structure, you have 100 trillion in your body, so you know that. Whenever you think you're poor, just think of that, 100 trillion cells. Every second, cells are dying. And new stem cells, these little 12-year-olds I talked about, are coming out. And the old cell that's dying, that may have been there for months or years, secretes your entire history hormonally into the new cell. Now what's really brilliant is that the human body totally, completely regenerates in 7 years. Isn't that amazing? I want you to get what I'm saying. So I take a snapshot of every one of your cells, we categorically compartmentalize that, and we come back 7 years from today, every cell is brand new. So you should say to me, Brian, you've got to be wrong, because here's a scar I got, I'm 60 years old, you may say to me, and here's a scar I got, I fell out of a tree when I was 5. How it happens is interesting. So the hormone secretion from the old dying cell to the new one says, make an indentation here. Isn't that amazing? Don't you look wildly different than you did the day you were born? One of the fun things we did in Catholic school when I was growing up, once a year, we would actually take our baby pictures and put them up in the room. We'd have to guess who we were. And we were probably in 6th grade, and 7th grade, and 8th grade, or whatever the hell. And we'd get it wrong all the time, because you look at 10 years old, wildly different than, and by the way, sadly, now almost 70, I look a hell of a lot different than I did at 40 too. Do you follow that? We keep going and going and going. But it's hormones that let that happen. Now this is so incredibly important for you, hormones. Where do you naturally get your hormones from? Raw, organic, plant-based foods. This is an incredibly important fuel for you. How many of you were brought up, certainly not me, on raw, organic, plant-based food? I didn't have raw anything, unless it was by mistake. That was it. The second thing you get in these foods are oxygen. And when you have a food cooking, the fragrance coming from a food is actually the oxygen molecule leaving it. Isn't that interesting? So we always joke and say, breathe heavy over the pot. That's the best part of it. But if you don't have oxygen present with proteins and vitamins and minerals and essential fats, they don't digest into the human cell. Isn't that something? Where do you get that naturally? Raw, organic, plant-based food. Phytochemicals we won't labor over. I've just spent about 30 minutes, 40 minutes with you on that. Most important finding in the history of science and health. And enzymes. Wrong on that too. You can get a doctorate degree or become a medical doctor or a biologist or a biochemist, and they're going to teach you the wrong thing right here at Trinity. They're going to tell you that an enzyme happens to be a protein. Wrong. The outer shell of an enzyme is a protein. But just like you, your inner self is a spirit, energy. The inner energy of an enzyme is electric. To feed your what? Your electric body. Your body is absolutely 100% electric. And why we're failing even in natural health care today is that we're still treating you chemically. This is why back in 1970s, early 80s, I became acutely interested in the future of medicine. Electromagnetic frequencies, laser therapies. And because of that, I have about $2.5 million worth of this equipment that all of the guests are exposed to. As of 2 months ago, all of the guests and our neighbors, by the way, are exposed to the latest zero-point gravity frequency that's pulsating on all the acreage of Hippocrates 24 hours a day. So the future of healthcare is to regulate the biofrequency field, bringing it back to healthy cells, so that healthy cells will not permit degradation. What we've known since 1954. How many of you were alive in 1954? I won't raise my hand. Dr. Harman told us that all aging and all disease comes from something called free radical damage. Free radicals are electric that's renegade and wants to kill healthy cells. But if the healthy cell has a high electromagnetic frequency shield around it, guess what? And what we found out after 3 years of being on the Hippocrates diet, not just a raw diet, Hippocrates diet, your cells actually live 6 to 7 times longer. So the cell life you have just by living on raw, living food is 6 to 7 times longer. So that means you age what? 6 to 7 times less. So that's why guys might look like I'm 30 and run around like I'm 20. Not because I did plastic surgery, but if I need it, I will. It's because when you plug into what everyone's supposed to be plugged into, and you're not playing around with theory and nonsense that people are messing around with, or habitually doing what you were taught as a child, you start to realize how life is plentiful. That life you should be thriving in. You shouldn't be suffering. You shouldn't be aging prematurely. You shouldn't be dying of disease. Your last word shouldn't be to a doctor or a nurse in a hospital, but to your loved ones when you're 110 years old and say, I'm not going to wake up tomorrow, I've had it. That should be the way you go out. But that's not what we do. And shame on us, because our great-great-grandparents right here on this island would completely be pissed off at us. Our ignorance, our detachment from reality, are succumbing to the monster of deception. We should be strong people, and we should be honorable people, and we should be self-respecting. And again, if you're not spiritually awakened. It's impossible to call yourself a spiritual being if you don't respect yourself. So we're going to go through these. I just described all of those to you. So supplements. Matter of fact, when I joined the team in 1975, we didn't give supplements to anyone. We used to think, you got everything from the food you need. But damn it, I started to do something called testing. And even those of us that live like incredibly well all the time and exercise and have good lives, every once in a while we'd miss something even though we were getting a lot. And it took me having a conversation with one of my friends that used to teach psychology at Harvard to wake me up. This goes back about 20 years ago, and he said to me something that I didn't want to believe at first because it was so profound. He said, if you take a person from 1850 and compare that person to 2018, we spend and use 15,000 times more energy. So the average person today is using 15,000 times more mental and neurological energy than a person did in 1850. And how he got me to understand it, he said, was there something called a telephone? No. Was there something called a TV? No. Was there something called a computer? No. You got the story? What was there? There was you, your family, and maybe the neighbors. And where did you live? On a farm. Were the farms filled with pesticide, fungicide, and herbicide? No. All farms were organic. So everyone's world was very colloquial, very, very small and cloistered. And your biggest stress level was your immediate family. Now that can be big, but not like when you have Sky News or RTE 1, 2, 3. Do you follow me? Or you had Donald Trump, who was one of the leaders of the world. Yeah. You didn't have a car. Yeah. I do everything right. I don't run around with girls, I don't drink, I don't take drugs, etc. But I've got to drive fast. I've got to do at least one thing wrong. So I bought myself a Tesla. You know what a Tesla is? I drive really fast in the Tesla. And a friend of mine said to me a number of years ago, before I had that fast car, he said, you know, if you put a person from 1850 into a car and drove at 60 miles an hour, they'd most likely have a heart attack. You and I take this for granted. Yesterday or 2 days ago, I flew in here on a plane going 600, 700 miles an hour. There were none of those things in 1850. There weren't cars in 1850. You follow? If you were a little risque and had some money in your pocket, you may be on a horse. That was the wildest thing you did. So we are bombarded by negative imagery, negative patterns, control, manipulation, disorder, noise. My generation played a lot of really hard music. Do you know the kids with the ear pods are going to be 3 times more deaf than my generation? The ear pods are more dangerous than those walls of amplifiers that Jimi Hendrix used to use. Isn't that something? So we have many, many things happening. So the more stress you have, 15,000 times more stress, the more what do you need? Anyone know? It's called nutrition. The number one thing that burns out your body are minerals, proteins, vitamins, and essential fats when you're stressed. How many of you here don't think you're ever stressed? Raise your hand. There are no liars among us. Just the question is, how stressed are we? That's about it. Like, people say to me, oh, Brian, you seem laid back. I said, but you should think what I'm thinking most of the time. None of us are really laid back. Nutrition and supplementation are powerfully important. You're on a planet today that is the most diseased planet in history. It's falling apart. We are lacking more nutrition than we ever had. There was, back in 1986, the first international summit on the environment in Brazil.